Struggle for New Friends, a game by Bill Molyneux. I hope that is how it is pronounced. This is his first design, and I talked to him by email a couple of times, and he told me that he designed this game because he wanted to use it as a tool to teach about the French and Indian Wars to his child, which I think is a great motivation to design a game, as well as a great way to introduce your kids to history. I will definitely use games to teach history to my kids. I will just use other people's games. I will not go through the trouble of designing them myself. There are so many good ones out there, you know? In any case, here you have a game that is simple, straightforward, and it is meant to be easy to play, and that portrays the French and Indian War. Here you have a group of red boxes, or I should say boxes bordered in red, representing areas controlled by the British player at the beginning of the game, and then you have areas bordered in blue, and those are under French control at the beginning of the game. You set up the game following setup instructions. Unfortunately, I do not have the time to set up the game for you, but guess what? The British player will set up on this side, the French player on that side. You have three types of units in this game. You have regular units, regular military units. They're simply identified by a symbol and a number, and you can make and give change any way you want. That is, you could break down a 5 into a group of 2 and 2 and 1, or 2, 1, 1, 1, so that you can split forces, send them in different directions. You can consolidate groups into groups with a higher value. You can just rely on flexibility there in being able to breaking down your units or reassembling any way you want. Then you have leaders that have a quality rating that will vary depending on the quality of the leader. The higher the rating, the better the leader, and the better things for the player that controls that leader. You also have native units that, generally speaking, work like the regular military in terms of your ability to break them down or to consolidate them in larger groups. The French player controls many more native units at the beginning of the game. Native units move fast, have certain advantages, but also they're not going to be around after battle. I'll explain later how and why. The game is divided in years. Each year is divided in 4 turns. Each turn represents a season, but the winter turn is not much of a turn, and not much happens. The only thing that happens in that turn is that players manage their cards. Yes, this is a card-enhanced game, not card-driven exactly, but cards are really important. I would say it is somewhere in between card-driven and card-enhanced. More than card-enhanced, maybe a little less than card-driven. In any case, during each winter turn, the players get a chance of refreshing their hand, discarding cards, drawing back up to 5, and then cards can be played during the other 3 turns of each year. Each turn starts with the British player receiving reinforcements, if the British player has a card for reinforcements and plays it. And of course, British reinforcements will mainly arrive from the sea. That means they will mainly land on the east coast here. After that, the British player gets to move his forces. Then he will resolve battles in areas occupied by both sides. The French player goes through the same procedure, playing a card, if a card can be played, receiving your units, moving, and fighting, and then you have the end phase in which you adjust victory point, check victory conditions, and things like that. Moving. Units can move at different speeds depending on the type of unit and whether or not a unit is led by a leader. Army points, remember we're talking about points, can move one area along any connection and battle. That is, they can enter an area containing enemy units and they can fight a battle there. They cannot move more than that. Native points can move and battle, or they can move 2 areas, but they cannot enter an area with enemy units during their second area, as they enter their second area. Also, any time in which you move into an area that contains enemy units, your movement is over for that turn. You have to fight a battle there. And as you can see, leaders will allow you increasingly better options for traveling longer distances and being able to start a battle at the end of your movement. Then how you resolve battles? Well, let's have a closer look at the map to answer that. First, both sides total the number of army points that they have available in that battle. The defender can also use the defensive bonus that is printed in the area in which the battle is being fought. In this case, for example, whoever is defending in there will receive a +2 bonus that is added to the army points involved in the battle. Once you have that, both players will roll on the combat table, which is this one. You roll a d6, you add the bonus for the quality rating of your leader, if you have leaders involved, and then you cross-reference the number of army points that you have with the modified result, and you find the number of losses that you inflict on the opponent. If one of the two sides inflicted more damage on the opponent than the other, that side is the winner and the losing side must retreat. If the losing side cannot retreat because there are no areas where to do so, then the losing side is destroyed. All units in that side that should retreat and cannot retreat are lost. So you always need to make sure that you have a path of retreat when you attack. Or in any case, when you take control of an area, you must make sure that you can retreat in case there is a counterattack there. Some areas contain fortresses, and defenders defending in fortresses do not have to retreat if they lose a battle. That means that taking fortresses can be painful, that you need to attack several times over several turns. Very often you need to send in reinforcements just to be able to empty that fortress. Or maybe you just get lucky in an attack or two, you manage to eliminate all of the defenders in a fortress. Point being that that is an issue, that is a factor. Both sides have a line of fortresses that clearly is placed on the border between the areas controlled by the two players. And control of areas is very important because what the players are trying to do is to take control of enemy areas. Each enemy area that you control will grant you the amount of victory points indicated by the number in the area. Of course, the opponent then may take control of areas that you control, and then you lose that amount of points. In order to win the game, the French player needs to accumulate 45 victory points by taking control of enough enemy areas, and the British player needs to accumulate 50 victory points and to take control of Louisbourg, Quebec, and Montreal. So there seems to be a burden there on the British player, but this is not impossible. It is not impossible at all, actually, for the British player to win the game. The French player seems to have an advantage early on in the game because during the early phases of the game, the French player can count on many native units to help him to deal powerful blows against the British lines. However, native units are not good for occupying positions that you took control of, because after a battle, surviving native units are immediately and automatically removed and they move to the closest native village. They're basically returning to their village to enjoy the spoils of war. So they're great for attacking and for moving fast, but they are not good for occupying areas. And occupation of areas is key, of course, in order, well, not just to get the victory points that you need, but to keep them, to keep those points before enemy counterattacks take them from you. And the British player, because of the native help that is being lent to the French, may have a hard time at the beginning of the game, but in later phases of the game, the British player starts receiving considerable reinforcements that enter from the coast. That also means that if the French player manages to go deep into British territory and take control of British ports, yes, that is great, but then reinforcements may arrive and may start, well, hitting, and they start attacking and counterattacking, And of course, as the French player, if you're occupying areas that are close to the coast, then native units take a long time to go back to that area after they return to their villages. There are just several self-balancing mechanics here that work very well. They do give the game a certain architecture, a certain narrative arch that goes from an initial French advantage to a moment in which things seem to hang in the balance to later phases in the game in which the French player pretty much becomes the defender. Of course, there are different ways in which this can play out, but this seems to be the general architecture of the story. And the French player actually can also win the game simply by surviving until the end of the game, that is, if the game ends and neither player has met victory conditions, then the French player wins the game. So the French player can also win the game simply by delaying things until the end of the game. So, Struggle for New Friends, in conclusion, is a game that has a pretty rich narrative, and it is a pleasant surprise when you look at the rules and you see that they are so short. They're probably around 4 pages. I had one or two minor problems, one or two minor ambiguities with the rules, but the designer clarified those, and probably even if he didn't, I could have figured it out after a turn or two. But it definitely is a game that has a good combination of simplicity and straightforwardness when it comes to the rules, and on the other hand, a quite rich thematic experience. The game is rich of historical flavor thanks to the cards, and those really add to the experience. If you're afraid that you will not be able to play the game in Solitaire because of the cards, that is not going to be a problem. Actually, even the designer suggests how you can do this, play the game in Solitaire. That is, you simply do not deal hands of cards to yourself to represent the hands of cards to the two sides. You simply keep the two decks in front of you, and each turn you flip a card for each side, and you implement whatever result you have there at the best of your possibilities. And the game really works that way, and actually the cards that often are seen as an obstacle to solitaire multiplayer gaming here become an advantage, because you do not know such things as the arrival of reinforcements. You cannot foresee when the British reinforcements will make it from the other side of the ocean. You do not know when new native units will rally to help you as the French player, and those are important elements that create surprises, that create moments of tension. For a game this simple, this light, with such a small map, and by small I don't mean just the size of the map, I mean the number of possible locations, well, you do have a range of options and a range of challenges that really make the game interesting. It is not that hard to win a major battle against the opponent, but it is much harder to do that and then to be able to retain a position for long before the opponent puts together a counterattack. Even more so, it is not that hard to concentrate a lot of units in one of the various bottlenecks that you have on the map. That's one of the things that you have with a point-to-point map with not many points, such as this one. There are just some crossroads that are particularly relevant. Well, it's not that hard to take control of one of them, but it is particularly hard if you decide just to stay there and to do nothing else. It may be hard not to be surrounded. There are ways in which the opponent can maneuver around you. It is very hard to retain control of the entire line. You almost never can. And as I was playing with both sides, because I played the game Solitaire, switching from side to side, really I had the sense that I always had one or two weak points that I was afraid of, that the enemy would be able to break through, and that would allow the enemy to gain a good advantage, surround my units, destroy huge amount of units. There definitely are moments of tension thanks to this. That is, bottlenecks that you have to go through, and the risk, the possibility, the fear that the opponent will exploit another bottleneck to cut you off from your supplies, from your own side of the board. Two very negative effects. So in conclusion, to me, Struggle for New Friends is a game that looks good. The components are pretty nice looking. It plays easily. It still has a lot of interesting challenges and problems to solve. It has moments of tension. It has historical flavor. Well, I don't know that there is much more that you can ask for from a war game.